This is ESPN.com's Eamonn Brennan here with my colleague C.L. Brown ahead of the national title game, and this is your big game breakdown. And C.L., you've been covering North Carolina all season long. What have you noticed about their play in the tournament specifically and late in the season that was maybe different from earlier in the year when some folks weren't convinced this was this kind of Carolina team?
I think they kind of led into that narrative because of the way they would finish games.
Sure.
They didn't close out up 14 at Northern Iowa. They didn't close out up 15 at Notre Dame, up at 8 at home against Duke. They had problems closing out games. Last night we saw Syracuse get on a run, cut the lead down to 7. They responded. Marcus Page hadn't hit a 3 all game. He hits a 3. Bryce Johnson gets a dunk on the next play. Theo Pinson hits a big 3. So they've gotten better about just knowing how to respond when it comes to finishing out games.
And it seems to me, and it seems like they've been saying this, to me I've thought this was a pretty good defensive team all year long. I think Carolina sometimes gets a bad rap in general because they play up tempo and people just sort of notice their final scores in the 70s, maybe 80s, and don't give them credit for good per possession defense. But I do think in the latter part of the season here, and especially the tournament, they've really ratcheted up on the defensive end, the defensive boards, and really sort of killed games off that way too, because Syracuse couldn't get a bucket when they needed down the stretch.
I think that I'd probably go back to the ACC tournament when they held Virginia. That was a kind of a back and forth game, and there was like an 8-minute stretch where they locked them down. Virginia didn't get a basket. I kind of go back to looking at that game as maybe the signature game in terms of their defensive effort. And I feel like that's why we doubted Carolina earlier in the year, because they were kind of coasting along like they didn't have to do those things, that they would. At one point, Justin Jackson told me that he felt like we played to the score, like we just outscore teams instead of feeling like we can stop teams. So I think that's another big difference with Carolina right now. They're going out knowing that they can play a certain level on defense, and they're living up to that potential.
Well, they'll absolutely have to get stops on Monday night. Villanova, as everybody saw, on Saturday scored. I don't even remember the final score at this point. A lot against Oklahoma.
51.
There it was, 95-51, 44-point win, the largest in national semifinal history. Their shooting percentage was their best in the past 20 years as a program, and also the second best in the Final Four ever, except for the 1985 Villanova team, which basically made every shot it took to upset and win the national title. So shot stopping for North Carolina is huge. But talking about this Villanova offense all season long, I think they've really evolved from a team that shoots a lot of threes because Jay Wright wants them to shoot a lot of threes, and that's part of his big stylistic push is we want to shoot more threes than the other team just as a sheer amount of quantity, because over time those numbers work in our favor. So we run people off the line and we go and take threes. But I think early in the season that manifested itself in Oklahoma as, oh, I'm open. I got to shoot it. Coach wants me to shoot it. Yeah. And they've adjusted their shot selection, really balanced themselves out, and become a lot more potent on the offensive end.
Yeah, I think Chris Jenkins specifically is going to be a potential matchup problem for Carolina. If you look at the starting lineup, I think Bryce Johnson might start off trying to defend Chris Jenkins. And Bryce Johnson doesn't like to be on the perimeter, floating around trying to defend guys. That could potentially lead to foul trouble. Jenkins, to me, isn't somebody who drives a ton. Like I think he kind of likes floating out too.
Yes, he does.
But I think he'll have to do both of those things for Villanova to be effective offensively.
Well, Villanova's performance absolutely set it up for, I think, a fascinating game on Monday night, particularly if they play that well. Carolina, super hot right now. That's your big game breakdown from ESPN.com. Keep it tuned here for all of your pre-national title and post-national title game needs.